There we go. I think we're live.
Wonderful.
Yeah, there's only one person watching, and it's my other account.
Yeah, it's fine. More will come soon.
Well, I've been putting on Twitter all day, and hopefully they count. But there you go. Well, this is the first live stream for my channel, and this is probably going to be a regular feature of Workshop Wednesdays. So, and tonight we've got a guest, Scott, from Scott Dance Films, with a wonderful documentary that's been out on YouTube. I think I've watched it 9 times to date.
Gosh, that's very humbling.
And it really is true. I think most of the top fans. That's all right. Well, I think it's very true that most of the Thomas fans have got beards.
I'm starting to see that now. I think lockdown as well has helped with that. You know, a lot of people have just sort of stayed at home and not really bothered with, I suppose, the finer side of grooming. But it's just one of those things really that I think people have decided to do now. It seems to be a trend. Yeah. I call it a lockdown trend. So there we go.
Except it grew on my chin and not on my head, where I'm losing it.
Yeah, well, mine was for a long time the opposite way around, and eventually, I think after I left it for long enough, it just kept on growing. So I don't know. It's sort of staying relatively there for now.
It's like birds; they migrate.
Very true. Very true indeed.
Oh. Right, so a little quick update on what is going to be coming forward from the channel before we get to doing questions and answers. And as you can probably see in the description, for all those who are probably watching this later on, I'm going to be modeling in all the gauges from N, O, or as the Americans call it, HO. Never get that why. O gauge and a bit of gauge 1. And to spice up the mix, there's going to be a little bit of TT. A lot of it's going to have to be scratch built. But the aim of this channel, the first aim of the channel, is to do an 8-foot by 2-foot Sodor inspired layout in N gauge to go with the recent releases from Bachmann, including the previously announced James that's still in the catalogue, we hope, and Toby that's been recently put in. But obviously their N gauge range at the minute is a bit limited, so we're having to do some building ourselves. And the first project is everyone's favourite shed, Knapford, or as it should actually be known in the TV series, Tidmouth. Or is that the other way around? No, TV series, it's known as Tidmouth. And it's Knapford Station that should be known as Tidmouth. But the TV series got it wrong. But typical. They get a production going and it's a little bit wrong. And there's also going to be engines, but if they're not out yet, I'm going to be doing them. Here's a Del Prado N-scale Flying Scotsman, painted up as everyone's favourite express engine. Not being able to find his tender yet to put with this, but there's that.
where the president had all the
as well as that,
to make a decision about whether or not we were going to bomb
there's
Syria
going to
with
be
the chemical weapon attacks.
We were
building
in
scenic.
the Situation Room while President
Currently
Trump
working on these
and
trees,
Secretary of State and others were in Mar-a-Lago.
which have come from
60 Tomahawk
Christmas
missiles
tree branches.
that were very precise.
When you get those Christmas trees that you have to individually insert,
One of my colleagues suddenly realized one of
They're,
the sites was being targeted. There was actually a contingent of Russian military officials
when you
and
have to,
advisors we would
the
have
Christmas
to take
trees that you
various
insert the individual branches to,
no inadvertent
trim them down, cover them in.
because of course that could
The
then
way I'm
set
doing
in
it is a bit different to how other people would do it. I'm using cotton wool.
If the Tomahawk missiles had
It gives a good texture so that when I can paint it, I can paint it.
He was with the first important summit meeting with President Xi Jinping in China. A mistake at this.
Some other things that are going to follow, I'll be using cereal packet is going to be my main form. And this is Rheneas that fits on the Smoky Joe chassis. All out of cereal packet. I will be using other forms of card, but I'm trying to do it as cheap as possible. So you'll get some skinflint tricks from me. Because I'm tight like that. So wherever I can save money, I'll save money. There'll be a fair bit to look forward to. I'm in the middle of filming the video for making the trees out the Christmas trees. And I'm making a second video of what the thumbnail is for this particular video. The works coach. I'm in two minds whether to do the works coach in O gauge or gauge 1 at the minute, but the measurements that are showing on that picture that I'll be using as a reference, it came from someone on Twitter. I can never remember the name. If you know who you are, put your name in the comments. And I might convert the measurements to O gauge so people can have a replica in that scale. Might have to find some ready to run stuff like the Lima towed brake van to slip it onto. Unless I can find the axle boxes and the wheel sets cheap enough. But other than that, there's a lot more to come. And that's that for the update on the channel.
Wonderful. That's a lot of that's a huge amount of work that you've already put into that, and especially as a cost-effective method. I think that's going to be really fantastic to see it grow and develop over time.
Well, with what's been going on in the world and the resurgence in certain hobbies, I think it's time that people got back to some of the skills that may have been forgotten. Like back in the 50s and 60s, my granddad told me stories of, oh, I know a lad who was at the end of the road who'd use a baked bean tin to build an engine. They'd flatten it out to make the rods. They'd save up the pocket money for the wheels and the motor. But the rest of the engine, literally tin plate. But they would do it as if it was one of today's modern plastic molded Hornby or Bachmann offerings.
Gosh, that's absolutely that's really fantastic. I had no idea that you could actually do that out of particularly out of tin. But it's brilliant that you've taken that a bit not from tin to more of a to another form of recycling. I think that's the brilliant thing of it, particularly now with all the concern about the environment and whatnot.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. I mean, if I can save a cereal packet from going in the landfill or in the council's coffers because we know that they sell it on. They're not that stupid. And if it becomes a useful model or something that lasts 50 years or even 10 years, it's something.
Definitely.
But there'll be other little tips and tricks that I'll be trying to demonstrate my way of. They're not going to be 100%. This is how you should do it by the book. It's my way, and anyone who follows them, that's up to you. But you take your own liability and responsibilities. So, other than that, any questions? At the time of recording, there's no people watching, so it's just between me and you now, Scott. Question tennis.
I suppose the question I would want to ask is, how have you been able to hold the model together with different parts of the cardboard? For example, Renes's model, you'd done that out of a cereal packet. How had the model's structure been held together?
I just use super glue, and if it's a cut edge against a flat edge, I just super glue together, and if it needs that little touch more, it goes back on. And eventually, when you have a couple of layers of paint on as well, that helps to hold. So, but if there is anywhere where there's a bit more thickness needed, I return to my old favourite of Milliput.
Mm-hmm.
And with the factory for Milliput only being an hour and a half, 2 hours away from me, it's quite easy to phone up and say, "Can you send me some?"
Gosh, that is very convenient.
I think a lot of people forget Milliput is made in Wales. It's on the west coast. I can never, and I don't have my Milliput close enough to grab the box. But if you look on the back, it's made in Wales.
Gosh,
And
okay, that's fantastic.
Well, I find it fun when I watch another YouTuber, Kudak888, and he's got a box of Milliput on there, and I'm thinking, that came from me. Well, my country. And it's just, sometimes it's weird because it's like the old Mars bars in a supermarket in Spain. You find it weird.
Yeah, no, definitely.
All right, question to you then. What made you want to do the documentary that you did and released? When was it? 2 weeks ago now?
I think it was just over a month ago now. The documentary, I released it just before Christmas time. I wanted to make it because we'd been asked by my university to do a long form module, and that really meant make your own feature-length film. And at the time, we were going to be working in film crews and teams and whatnot, but because of the pandemic, it put everything on hold. And I thought, okay, I've got a choice. I can either wait until after the pandemic is over, which is an indefinite amount of time, or I can ask if I can make a documentary on my own. And then I can still do that now and graduate on the correct time. So I thought about something I wanted to do it on, and I realized a lot of people don't actually realize the impeccable craftsmanship and all varying sorts of challenges that the crew faced in Shepperton, building up arguably one of the most famous live action shows of all time. And I thought, you know what, this is something that needs to be shared and light needs to be shed onto it. And so I thought this is the right time to do it, especially with all sorts of new information regarding the Thomas universe coming out almost month by month. I mean, this month alone, we've had all these lovely ruler photos from Abby Grant, and we didn't have those before. So, you know, I just thought there's so much more information now. Now's the time to make it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been watching all those ruler photos come out, and they've interested me over the years. And when you look into the history a bit more and find that the first models were plastic, then eventually they were brass. And the impression I get for some of the models is they weren't made out of brass until Thomas and the Magic Railroad.
Mm-hmm.
So 15 years at least there was a plastic model of some of the
Yeah.
engines running around until someone robbed one of the props and from Drayton Manor. Why didn't anyone else think?
Yeah.
I think we'd all have, haven't we?
Yeah, it's. I mean, that is a very sad thing when you think about, what has happened to the models at Drayton Manor. I still don't know if I actually must have the courage to go and see the languishing lament of those characters that I grew up watching on television as a child. I think that would be a very depressing sight. But you're right. I think the only models, to my knowledge, that were brass was Lady's model, Percy's model, and Thomas's in Brit's movie. And even then, Thomas's brass model was only used after calling all engines. They started using brass models in season 9, so even after the Magic Railroad, they were still using the Perspex models, which really does show these old things stood the test of time and is a good testament to the craftsmanship.
Yeah, it really does, and you can tell by looking at the models, even though there's not the full detail of what a model train manufacturer would do, you can tell there was love and care in them. And if something needed weathering, they did it justice. Like the tenders for Henry episode. Those tenders were beautifully weathered. You can still see on some of them that they were all LMS or LNER. I can't remember. I know it was one of the railway companies, but you can still see that come through as well as all the dirt and grime. You can tell someone had fun doing that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think, someone like David Mitten, who loved to put the models through their paces, both cosmetically and physically, would have probably seen that as more of a recreational thing to do other than a job. He really was quite literally one of those 1 in a million people that would have just gone completely headfirst in and happily worked all night, even if they only appeared on screen for about a minute or something. But it was fantastic. Their attention to detail really did pay off. It really, really did.
Yeah, you can see that in the larger sets. I've noticed in the later series, I think I stopped watching after series 5 or 6 and only got a few of the intermittent episodes after that. You can tell that the set dressers, they still love to put the detail in, regardless of how toyish the episodes had become. Like Thomas and Percy transporting a large balloon. Simple logistics, you deflate the balloon.
Yeah, I've got a lot of I've specialized in writing scripts for quite a few years, and I've always had a big problem with the writers' room in Thomas. Not all of them, I think there are certain people like Abby Grant and even Diane Basso, who did the Oliver and the Snow Engine episode, for example, who have done rather well, but for some reason I just think the laziness really did shine through, and it was quite condescending, I think, because children know that kind of stuff doesn't happen on railways. And when you have this it'll do attitude for a kids' TV show, I think the quality and the respect for something so prestigious does dip, and those episodes aren't memorable. I only know that episode because of how stupid it is. I don't remember any of the CGI episodes really off the top of my head. There's nothing to make them memorable compared to the live action ones that you were mentioning.
Yeah. To me, it's not just the detail, it's the characters, and I feel that they missed the mark, obviously, with some of the stories. But I've also read elsewhere that they've done surveys and found that the kids love the detail. They love the details in the books, especially when the books were out originally. When the TV series, they love, that's how that particular motion on Gordon works, or that's where the smoke comes from. It never looked like that in the picture, but okay. They like the detail. And there were several surveys done up until a few years back where they found that the kids liked the detail, wanted the detail, and obviously got whitewashed. But then
Yeah.
such as it's money that speaks, and obviously things suffer at the cost of money, and there's people that just see the pound signs and not the nostalgia or not the detail, and
Yeah.
it hurts me.
Definitely. I think it hurts a lot of people. And I think what a lot of people need to realize, this is certainly what I was taught, you obviously have writers that come in and out in writers' rooms throughout the series, but it's very important, I think, as a writer to realize this is not your character. This is a character in the world you are inheriting that has been iconic long since it came onto the television scene. And consequently, as a good writer, you have to stick to that. You have to do that research. I mean, I remember Andrew Brenner mentioned he looked at that Thomas Wikia site, I think 15 times every time he wrote one episode, because he knew he'd be picked up on his mistakes for it. I don't remember where I saw that, but I remember reading that. And he was faithful to the world that we knew and what we had seen. And consequently, those episodes he did were better. You know, I certainly think they did have more appeal, which, you know, is a shame that it only lasted so long, but I'm grateful we had it regardless.
Yeah. But as Gordon would say, we live and learn.
Well, I hope at some point with
I
whatever's
hope that
future, it'll go soon. That I don't really want to mention it, that new reboot, which I think was enough to make everyone retch, but you know, I can only at this point.
That's £10 in the swear box for mentioning the reboot.
Yeah, I'll pay that. Yeah, there is a lot there's a lot wrong with it, and I don't think there's much right with it. It won't last. It definitely won't, and that's
to
because
me it looks like Chuggington on steroids.
Yeah, I mean that's. Yeah, I mean it's hard to really top that painful metaphor, but I completely agree. You wouldn't think there'd be anything worse than that other show whose name I shan't mention. And I don't know. I guess it's almost like, oh, it'll do. You know, we have Thomas. There he is. He makes us the money, but you know, nothing about that is going to make him stand out. I think it was. No. The Unlucky Tug who did a video on why it was going to fail before Mattel pulled it off online under the claim of copyright, but I think we know why it was really pulled off. And you know, it's just not going to stand out compared to anything else. It's going to be, you know, on TV or Netflix, wherever it's going to go, and it won't last. It won't be iconic. It won't be special. The only thing that's going to be iconic is an inherited character. That's it.
Yeah. An inherited character that looks like Chuggington on steroids, and George the Steamroller got his way and crushed it railway.
Yeah, honestly, that sounds a lot more preferable than what we've got at the moment. But, you know, I think at this point it can only go up from here. I mean, you know, I'm quite grateful that, you know, there are fans like you, for example, who know of what the original essence was, not just making the fandom about them, but understanding where that appeal to children came from, because these people are still very much in touch with what appealed to them in their childhood, and there isn't anything wrong with that. So, I think it's still there.
I've got 4 kids. Yeah, I'm still here. And I've got 4 kids, and I've grown up reading them the Thomas stories, and the eldest is 8. He's now into other things like on the Xbox. And my second son, he's autistic, and he likes Thomas. And for years, the Thomas was associated with the Autistic Society of the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that research. They did this, that, and the other, and they found that the kids could communicate with Thomas because Thomas's lips didn't move, but they knew it was him talking. And then that got all thrown out the window when it went to CGI, and you could see the lip sync. But they still love they have to play with my Hornby models and my Bachmann models because they're they are the TV series to them. I've tried to keep them into the model series. I've let them watch the CGI, and they're like, "What's this?" And that's coming from the target audience that big company want. And I'm thinking, if that's the target audience that I've grown up, that are my kids, you've got no chance. But they won't listen to voices because, as we said earlier, it's the pound signs that talk, or in Mattel's case, dollar signs.
Well, yeah, you hit the money on the head there, absolutely. And it is strange. I think it's the fact that, the live action scenes with Thomas, although their faces never moved, because they were so expressive and because each character was so different, and their character arcs, although they developed over time as individuals, we could still relate to that. We could still identify ourselves amongst these characters and the world and the environment that they found themselves in. And that was, I think, something that we could really see a more human side to, because they interacted like us. And I think appeal that Thomas had, anyone can understand and relate. Now with the CGI thing, I think that went pretty quickly. It was nice when it came out at the time, but it's not got the amazing glitz and glamour that I think the old Thomas had.
Yeah, to me, CGI it's one of those. CGI should stay in the realms of the big movies, because they can afford to pay for that little rivet that no one's going to see on that one tower that's in the background that you're never going to see. They can pay for that sort of detail, but when it comes to a kids show, the way I see it is CGI should stand for not computer generated imagery, computer generated idiot.
Yeah, it is a shame, but I think at the same time, the question was, either do we stop Thomas from an executive's point of view because no one can relate to it anymore, or, can we carry Thomas on with some new modernities? And in some ways, Thomas had been, because it was from that 80s era, along with other things like Fireman Sam, for example, also in a live action style, you look at it and you just think, it's more iconic for that than a CGI thing. People know it for that, old-fashioned style. I mean, that's all the images that everyone uses in the newspapers and the TV adverts. No one really knows about the CGI thing. And so it's almost like shooting yourself in the foot, really. But, they'll either find out the hard way or they'll find out the hard way, the executives. And, they don't want to be told that they're wrong, but they'll find out in one way or another, and it will be a case of, I told you so.
Yeah, especially when they see everyone going on to YouTube for their own creations, and everyone's like, oh, look at this, and they'll wonder why has that got 1 million views and our poultry program's got 2? Well, that's because the people who love Thomas know it better. And no matter what, there's always going to be the big corporation that someone's going to go in and say, oh, I know Thomas. He's that little blue one, isn't he? Or as the girlfriend used to say, Thomas, isn't he the one with number 6? No.
Yeah.
That's the cheeky little one who acts like our youngest.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone knows about these characters, which is completely understandable. It's fine. Not everyone's going to be dedicated to Thomas as we would have been throughout our lives. But when they're working on that show to deliver something that has been around for so long, you'd expect them to, for what they're getting paid to do that. Really, for all the industry professional techniques they've had to learn, you'd expect that it would be treated with respect.
Yeah, so would I, but I heard this somewhere. For every program that goes to CGI from stop motion like Thomas or Fireman Sam or Postman Pat, they take on more employees to finish the series than what they do when it was oh, there's 5 people in the studio doing all the sets. In a model series,
that is
there was 5 people on the building the sets could actually go upstairs and say, right, we've done this shot, cut there, add it there, boom, put it together. They didn't need an editor, but they had the editors. But in CGI, you look at some of the credits. Why has it got 5 directors for that one episode? Why has it got 5 million CG animators, all that happen to be from an Asian country that you can't pronounce half their names because they're not Toho?
Yeah, that does tend to be how it goes, unfortunately, and you wonder if that is cost effective at the end of the day, because you do have to pay people money. You have got to get, and yes, you can say, oh, there's a lot more people who will do the money for cheaper, but if it becomes like an assembly line, of which the CGI animation has, it becomes very lackluster. And when they corner cut, I'm sure they'll think, oh, we're only corner cutting this once, but when it builds up, then it becomes much more of a problem, and it doesn't sit well with people over time. And unfortunately, that's what we've had for the last about over 10 years or something now.
Yeah, I can't remember when to. Season 5 was 2000, 2001, 2008, 2009, where it started becoming once a year, where they released a series, and then it was CGI.
Yeah, they did do a good job to an extent with the new hit era, which was very much, I think, probably iconic in its own way. I mean, yes, a lot of people hated the roll call song and the instrumental version, much to the delight of Michael Dolan and Junior Campbell. But it was a big risk, and it did work until the later series, when they started doing that classic sort of 3 strikes and you're out scenario, which they had with Sharon Miller, who I still I'm not so quick to forgive. Because lazy writing, there's just an excuse for it.
Yeah, there's a couple of names that keep cropping up that I want to avoid or strangle, and but they've probably looked at the mistakes and gone, yeah, we had our hand in that. Nothing we can do now. Bye.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose you do need to come to terms with it and say, that is show business. We are gonna have to produce something, and sometimes I think you've almost got to let go of that emotional hold of how other people have handled the show. But for that reason, I am very glad that we've got the classic series for that reason. Although when you look at certain episodes and when they've corner cut, for example, seasons 11 and 12, the set design is appalling because it's basically just trees everywhere. And you can just tell they were very rushed when they did it, because, as you said, those guys who were doing all the set design, they were good. They knew what they were doing, and they had their own way of doing it. But if they were rushed, the result was much less flattering, and unfortunately, that showed. So
yeah. Very true. Yeah, but where it lost me was when it went to CGI. But then, in a way, I'm thankful that Big World, Big Adventures came along, because then it got the roll call song out of my head. But then I had the Big World, Big Event, and then it was just that when that came along, it was the spiral for me that, okay, this is going to end it. And the way that they were bouncing, and then now I think it's series 23, 24, it looks like the engines have got spots because of the rivet detail.
Yes. Which I respect that. I respect that they've added in a bit more detail, which is nice. But I mean, all things considered, the whole Big World thing was, I'm not going to criticize the whole thing of being politically correct and everything, because it's very important to be politically correct. But they tried overtly hard to do that and really push messages down children's throats. For example, caring about the environment and what sort, which is all very well and good. But at the same time, the episodes where Thomas went around the world and was worried about environmental conservation and that kind of stuff, it was really that relevant to what a train worries about, nor was it relevant to the whole life that Thomas had lived on Sodor, or, you know, did it stand out that much? It was just very flat, very lackluster.
A 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old doesn't care about environmental issues. They're aware of them. They don't care.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
just want to be entertained. And to me, I'm going to keep my kids shielded from Thomas at the minute. Even if they get onto even if they get onto Netflix and start watching, here's £10 in the swear box. The reboot.
I think if they did come across it, they wouldn't pursue it. They just wouldn't be able to relate to it. But, you know, I think that's because you've raised them right, and, you know, you've taught them this is what Thomas was. This is what made him magical. You know, that whole thing of you watching these models and you feel like you can always reach the television screen and touch them because they look so realistic. I think that's what matters more to an audience, especially children. They want to feel like they're right there.
Yeah, well, when the books first got released at the end of World War II, they were one of the first sets of books, if not the first sets of books, to have colour. And the books were the right size for children to read on their own.
Yeah. And, you know, people have never seen those colours before, and because they're so bright and so bold, that memorable nature was thus born. And because of these engines getting involved in such almost human situations, arguing, disagreeing, or not liking changes on the railway when, you know, there was more work to be done than they'd been used to, or new engines had come and gone, we were able to realize, actually, although this world looks so idyllic and so different, this is just like my world. And it provided an escapism, but one that we could relate to. Specifically, I think, in post-war Britain, which, you know, was still reading from the war after a long time. So it was important for children to have that, I think.
Yeah. And I always loved the philosophy of the Reverend Audrey of it's never the crew's fault or the human characters at fault, it was always the engine.
Yeah, because that's about making your choice, and you learn from that, don't you?
Yeah, and I know that it's been brought up quite a few times in publications that, but why is it this, that, and the other? And why is Thomas sexist? Why is it the girls following him? And the way I look at it is, those were the times that the books were written in. It was written for that situation. And yes, it can be adapted to equal rights and this, that, and the other, but it shouldn't have to be. Alice in Wonderland, and that was Alice in Wonderland. I live in North Wales. The very town that I live in is 4 miles away from the town Alice in Wonderland was written in.
Wow.
That town is Llandudno. And look at the hold Disney have.
Yeah.
Disney have the hold on that. They haven't.
Sure
they haven't changed. Well, they haven't changed any of the words in that from the original story. So why should?
No, they haven't.
So why should things have to be adapted to suit? I'm probably going to get no viewers for this one, but why should it have to be adapted for now? I see books, when I read a book, as there's a time capsule. I can close my eyes and imagine I'm on the Titanic, if it's a Titanic book or whatever, and live through the stories that are in that book. That's one of the points of books, to get you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But when things like that big company that's currently got Thomas turn up and go to the United Nations for advice, then there's something seriously wrong, where it's ask permission, don't do it this way.
Yeah, you've really hit the nail on the head with that one, and it is strange. You know, I remember playgroup and whatnot when I was a little kid, both girls and boys loved playing with the Thomas trains when they'd be brought out of their storage box in the mornings, and no one ever thought they were sexist. It never came across to my parents' minds, even when I was growing up and becoming older. All the Thomas toys are sexist. There were female characters written into, Reverend Audrey's books. Daisy and Mavis would be some, very classic examples. But I've always thought whenever people have decided, oh, Thomas is sexist, I always think this is coming from someone who's never actually sat down and really read a book, one book or even one story, let alone watched an episode, even the classic episodes. And I can just tell because they're giving their own adult input, and there's never been anything to report that the old days of Thomas, so to speak, have contributed to a rise in sexism. If anything, I think Thomas, as a TV show, stands for one of the great moments of female empowerment, because Britt Allcroft was, one of the richest businesswomen in the world in the 90s, and she won a BAFTA for what she had done. And Britain was, I'm sure you'll know more about this than me, pretty darn sexist back in those days, especially in the filmmaking industry. It's a very, very sexist industry. And the fact that they had a woman literally telling all these men what to do and made Thomas into this phenomenon that no one foresaw on the small screen is a testament to female empowerment. I think that's something everyone forgets, and it's a shame. Britt may have made mistakes, but she knew how to get things done, and she knew what good quality meant, and she never buckled under that. She never buckled from it.
Definitely, so, especially when you remember the story of, oh, there's the voice. That's how she found the voice of Thomas. She was walking past the living room door and heard Ringo Starr on some program, and Bob's your uncle. She's there 2 months later trying to get hold of him and speaking to him with Reverend Audrey. And the fun bit that I always remember was the Reverend Audrey having to say, it's not Tommy, it's Thomas.
Yes. But that is, that's a really good example. Britt was the driving force. The fact that she was the one who sat there and directed Academy Award nominee actors like Alec Baldwin and Peter Fonda, that tells you she's not a no one. She is someone who's a very highly esteemed woman. All right, maybe not now because she's retired, and she deserves that. But she worked with some pretty big people and had to manage a lot of money and make sure things were done to health and safety standards, which, there were a lot of health and safety issues with the smoke because it was a toxic chemical that puffed out of the engines as they moved along the set. But, Britt, I think for, a 90s television producer for children was really out there. And she inspired me to go into filmmaking. A woman inspired me, not a man, a woman. And I think that should never be forgotten.
But look at the longevity of the series, and everyone now jumping to the defense of the original series, saying the current versions of Thomas is not Thomas. I can fully appreciate that and understand, because a lot of my generation grew up in the early 80s and 90s. I was 5 in 1990. And it wasn't until then that I read my first actual Reverend Audrey book, and then realized that the stories were, oh, that's where they came. Oh, okay. And then, even at my 5-year-old head, I was starting to think, what about the history? And I was creating my own histories for the engines. And then, as I got older, I was able to get the book, the Sodor history book. And the follow-up book from Christopher Audrey, the Reading Between the Lines.
Yeah. And those have proven to be a really, really good, successful adaptation to the whole, folklore and history of the island. And, that really does, I think it really gives a good testament to just how important these sorts of little imaginary worlds are. There's all sorts of, I guess almost like discovery books or additional books that delve more into the world that all these very famous fictitious worlds are. Lord of the Rings would be a very good example. And, when that's a hugely popular thing with much of a fandom base. And, Thomas has done it the same way. It's a very adult show for children, at least the version that I grew up with. but it's still charming. It's still got the charm. It's still there. My parents very much remember it still. And I inherited all the Thomas toys and videotapes from my brother. So, the appeal went on through many generations in my family.
Yeah, it's carrying on in my family, and my 4-year-old at the minute has nicked my Daisy and my City of Truro Ertl toys. The weird thing is, with the City of Truro, I had 4 of them in the boxes still.
Oh, wow. Gosh.
I gave 2 of them away as special presents to autistic kids from when I was working on a steam railway. So just gave them. Kept 1 in the packet and 1 out the packet. The 4-year-old, when he was 2, found the 1 in the packet and ripped the packet before I could stop him.
Oh, no.
And was playing with it. So I was like, "It's a good job. I love you, you little."
Yeah, it's remarkable how those toys have inflated hugely in value. And at the time, I remember in the toy shop, what was it? I remember I bought, as a treat, I was allowed to buy a Thomas Wooden Railway duck for $9.99, and that was expensive back in those days. And now, when you think what a new in box early 2000s Thomas Wooden Railway duck would cost, I mean, I don't want to think about that.
Well, I've been looking, and I've noticed recently a lot of Ertl versions of stories coming out, that people are remaking the stories with Ertl, and a lot more sales of them are starting to come up. And when I see the old original 80s, 90s packaging, where it's for Bill and Ben, a bright yellow packet with the smoke puff with their name in, or the blue one for Edward Thomas Gordon, I remember back to opening them packets and going, my engines had paper faces. You lucky gits are starting to get the 3D faces on these. Even in that era, they were starting to go from paper face to the 3D plastic faces. And hidden under all my craft stuff that's going to be used for the series is a drawer with some secreted Ertl toys that the 4-year-old has not learned the location of yet. Some of which have got the paper faces.
Yeah, well, those are, it's interesting. Those are they're very hit and miss. And when I say that, I mean, in regards of their value, you can go to car boot sales or charity shops and whatnot. And I was able to find an 83 paper face Thomas. It was actually in quite good nick. And that I got for £2.50. Whereas if you were to go on eBay, which I've got a love-hate relationship with that website, and you were to see one of those, I mean, the price for that would be at least 10 times that amount. So it's bonkers when you think about it, really. Yeah. But people like those toys.
Yeah, Britt Elcroft started something when she was doing her woman power thing, and when she got the right licenses and got the right terms and conditions. I mean, look at Hornby. Their models were based on the books, not the TV series. Mm-hmm. I like that about Hornby. They went, well, we're doing it this way, like it or lump it. But then I think greed started to take over too much, and when it became the fees that everyone was arguing about.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that, it shows, doesn't it? If you go to, like, I don't know, I went to the supermarket, and I think it was last week, and I came across those new Thomas toys. I don't know what they're called now. They're supposed to be die cast, but they're so light. There's little
Thomas Adventures, I think.
Yeah, one of those. And they were charging £10 for each model, and I was just shocked. I thought, this is something that is mostly made of plastic and doesn't even weigh half a kilogram. And when I was a kid, I could have paid, albeit 1p less, for something made of wood that was proper and accurate to the television series, and would have lasted far longer, and still has, despite heavy play and all that kind of stuff. And you just think, it is literally about making money. It's not about the accuracy. It's just about putting a face on a train and waiting for the money to roll in, and then asking, oh, why hasn't it come in?
Yeah. But The one bit that hurts me about all these licenses and the fees and everything is the UK heritage railway scene. I know one railway near me that they have told me unofficially that they get approximately 50 to 70% of their annual income from Day Out with Thomas events, and they used to run 3 or 4 a year, as well as all the other gala weekends where there'll be just a visiting engine from here, there, and everywhere. But they're becoming cost prohibitive now because the rules and regulations are kicking in. Of, I can understand them wanting the staff to have criminal records checks.
Of course.
I completely understand that. What I can't justify or ask anything about is why they want 1,500 volunteers to all have a CRB check when on a weekend you'll only have 30 volunteers running the engines and the cafe. Why does it have to be all? And the railway would be the one footing the bill.
Yeah, that is the problem.
Volunteers pay it. And at £70 to £100 a pop, you got 1,500 volunteers. There's a large chunk of your money. And then you've got to have an authorised fat controller. And now one of the stipulations is you've got to have one of the authorised official licensed engines that has been pre-approved to be Thomas.
Yeah.
I can sort of understand, but if Mattel are that worried about it, put 20 million to one side and build 10 brand new E2 tank engines based on Thomas the Tank. License them yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree. It is a tragic shame because, Mattel is not a poor company. They are not a poor company. I remember how much Hit Entertainment's value went up overnight. I mean, they paid Brit, I forget how many million it was back in the early 2000s, and then overnight their value went up to 1.5 bill overnight. It's huge.
I think Ghislaine and Hit Entertainment, as the companies were combined then, were purchased for £245 million.
Yeah. So that's a huge, that's a shocking great big amount of money, and that was just back in the early 2000s. And Mattel own a lot of other materials. So there's no way that them, having to cough up the money for, like you said, accurate Thomas trains would be, if anything, a huge fee for them. And, I completely understand, you've got to have that security for children and everyone else's safety at these events. And that's all very well and good. And I'm all for that completely. But I'd never expect a heritage railway to have to pay for all that money. And the problem is, to overhaul these engines, to redo the boiler on one of the engines on the Bluebell was about, £3,000. That's a huge amount of money. And these are non-profit charities. So it's a bittersweet thing, realistically.
And
it's a very bittersweet
thing. I can see a lot of these heritage railways potentially not opening up again after this that we're going through. Because number one, there's this coal crisis that's heading our way very quickly, where planning permission has been denied for a coal plant in Newcastle, and the only Welsh producing coal mine is closing this year or next. We're going to have to get our coal from Poland, and at 200, I think there was one railway that claimed it was £250 per tonne of coal that they burn. And they will burn 1 ton of coal a day running. Yeah,
you're completely right. And that's not the first time I've heard of that. That's not the first time. And we have been getting coal, admittedly, from Poland for quite a long time. Ironically, the Brecon Mountain Railway in Wales, for them, it's cheaper to get coal from Wales than it is from a coal mine 3 miles down the road, which is the most absurd thing, to get coal from halfway across Europe than just 3 miles down the road. I mean, they only need 3 tons for a weekend, I've heard. I mean, that is just absurd that it's cheaper to to go across a continent for that. The problem is also a lot of, I mean, we're using coal from Russia and Poland now. The quality is pretty bad. Not all of it, but a lot of it is pretty bad. And that means a lot of clinker builds up in the locomotives. It means there's a lot more time and money and resources cleaning the engines out. And that means over time, they'll need to have more maintenance done on them. So it's not the best trade-off, I think, really.
Well, back in the 50s and 60s, I know that technology wasn't around then. They did a comparison test of what was to become one of the new generation diesels compared to a couple of steam engines. And they found that pound for pound, the steam engine was more efficient at using its fuel than the diesels at the time, because they burned, and it was literally ash that was left, and you'd had one of the waste products was the heat. So the only other waste product was being the ash, and they used the ash for things like packing up the railway and building it. And ash is actually quite a good, with certain bits of clinker in from the fireboxes, is good as, some say it's good as fertilization, some say it's good as a filter.
Yeah, you're completely right. They did have a lot of problems with diesel engines, in the early years of dieselization and the failed modernization plan. Ironically, my dad worked on the South African railways in the 70s back in South Africa. That's where my family are from. And until 1990, they were still using steam engines on the main line around South Africa because it was so much cheaper to use all the coal they had as opposed to the oil. And, the steam engines themselves, they were horrible to drive in the heat of that part of the world. But you know what? They worked. And they were often tasked with all the heavy freight, and there's a lot of minerals to be hauled about on rail, but it worked. That was the thing. It just worked. It was cheaper rather than using diesel until as late as 1990. I mean, that is just mental. That is absolutely crazy. But that is the irony of that.
Yeah. Well, it's just the way of the world. And like we've said a couple of times already, it's money that talks, and it shouldn't be money that talks. But so anyway, you got any other sort of questions you want to ask?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what made you want to do this huge topic or project rather, on building all the different Thomas models and layouts with different gauges? Because that's very ambitious, and I've got no idea, and I've got no doubt that you'll definitely achieve it. But what made you want to do something like that?
Well, for the gauge one, I'm never going to have anywhere big enough to run them, so they're just going to be static replica type models of, this is my version of a particular engine that I've done it in my colors, my way, but as true as I can to the books as well as the TV series. So it's a retro hydro hybrid sort of replica that's my own. O gauge is a little bit more manageable. I can do sets on an 8-foot by 2-foot board. If I also used a nice lino on the floor in the kitchen without telling the girlfriend that I've made a set. And I was just checking she wasn't behind me then to kill me. But there's options there where I can also go to people's layouts who are happy to run the engines and say, right, okay, you can have that as that particular station or this, that, and the other. 00HO, purely because I've been able to buy them and collect them. I'll want to run them, but obviously they're going to get too worn, and for one of the manufacturers, they're no longer producing them, so I can't get the specific parts. So if I break a boiler or break a wheel, that's that for them. But that's a more manageable one where I can actually make a play train set for the kids as well, and make it a bit more prototypical.
Mhm.
But for the N-Gage, there's not that many that I've seen on YouTube that do N-Gage. I know that there's a lot in Japan. There's a YouTuber called 25 Enioko, or it sounds like what I've just said, but it's not spelt how I'm thinking it's spelt. Me and Echo. And he, from what I can see of his models, he has built his own Gordon using a Henry. He's built his own Edward using but these are all the Tomics ones.
Right, yeah,
So they've used
yes.
So no wonder the Henry for the Tomics range is extremely scarce, because it's all gone back to Japan, where there's 5 or 6 in Japan that are, oh, I'll buy 1,000 of them so I can have a Gordon, James, and Edward. A Toby, I've even seen a Toby and a Devious Diesel and Bocos and Daisies, and I'm looking at them and going, okay, that's something a bit more manageable. But I've got an N-Gage Bachmann, Thomas and Friends group on Facebook, which I run. So the channel is tying in with that page, so there's going to be updates there, there's going to be updates on here, and as and when Bachmann are making buildings, like if they end up building Tidmouth sheds, I'll swap mine out for theirs. So it sort of becomes a Bachmann demonstration layout, but unofficial. But I want to show the possibilities that can be done in all possible ranges. And in some weird way, if I build a model in O-Gage or Gage 1, I can show you the super detail of this is how to get that bit to that bit to do that. And then if I have to build that model in N-Gage, I can remember what it's like in O-Gage, but with a lot less detail.
Yeah, and I think that would be quite rewarding as well, because I've seen well, they've been around for quite a long time now, the custom Thomas models from the Tomics series, and you know, a lot of people have often had unanswered questions, you know, how did you do this and how do you do that? And it's, you know, I think it's really rewarding if, you know, you sit there and you show people the progress of how to do steps X, Y, and Z, and people go, oh, that's how I can do it. And you're passing on wisdom and skills. And I think that's really nice when you get to make people really pleased and happy and know, oh, that's brilliant. This is how I can do something I've wanted to know the answer to for however many years.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those that if I can show someone my way, they can look at my way and think, oh, I can't do it that. Oh, I might be able to do it this way. And it'll be that light bulb moment for them where, oh, okay, I'll do it this way. But then obviously there's going to be a lot of skills that are the same across the board, because the quartering of wheels, setting up a motor, the bits that you don't get to see is there are going to be some slight variances, but some people will use super glue to build the brass chassis, other people will solder it. Such as life, people want it quick and done, and so it's just showing ways that I can do things, and if you take something from it, like we've got I'm going to be trying to do a whole load where I can show you how to make scenic scatters and things like that from green scourers, and you know those green foam blocks that you get in florists.
Oh yeah,
I found if I've got one of those graters that you wind and you squeeze it, and as you squeeze it, it's sort of like a garlic crusher, but it's the grater that you wind. I can't find that at the minute. The girlfriend's been tidying like women do.
But it's brilliant.
I've been able to make it into a powder, and here's a little diorama that I've built out of cardboard. Henry and his tunnel.
Gosh, that's wonderful. That's brilliant.
I was even stupid enough to paint all the way back to the back of Henry, and I was thinking, no one's going to see the paint. But scatter. But I ended up using the scatter on the top, the powder.
That's fantastic. Gosh.
So, and
That's
while
wonderful.
it's still there, I can still mold it. I can mold it a little bit and make it smoother, or just weird different ways. Like if you can do weird little ways, like for the Thomas model series, the set guys went to local fruit and veg stalls. Can I have your fake grass, please? That's how they start. That's how they started with the grass. If you look at the scenes where it's James and the bootlace, or Henry and Gordon at the tunnel with Henry getting locked up, if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see all the grass. You'll see black lines in between it, and that's because it's the same as it's greengrocer's grass, which a lot of people now will probably think it's artificial grass from like what they use for football pitches, but it's not. It's from a greengrocer's. Someone looked at it one day and went. But I've often had images of going to the butcher's and saying, you know, those plastic things that you have as a little hedge in between your sectioned meats, because for some strange reason I always remember a butcher's window as it looks like a field. There's the pork, there's the beef, there's the lamb, and those red and green little hedge things is like hedges separating the. I've gone into a couple of butchers and asked if they had any of them left, and they said they had to destroy them because of health and safety, because the amount. Because I was going to just put some green scour over them, bit of scatter material and some hairspray, instant hedge.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame that they had to get rid of them, but yeah, I mean, if you can save money and still make things look good and always cheat it, that's a fantastic part of craftsmanship, and particularly if you're taking inspiration from the guys in the early days of Thomas, that's fantastic. And if it works, there's no need to fix it. So that is fantastic when that really does come to fruit. I think it really is brilliant that you've been able to suss out those little details and make them work for your benefit.
Yeah, it's just like what I always do: look and learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't know the answers to something, there's no shame in. There's no such thing as a stupid question.
No,
it might be stupid to the person that you're asking it, and then when they go, "Are you being serious?" and you're like, "Yeah, I really want to know how to do that particular bit." Okay, well, I've shown you a million times, but here we go again. Like what I've said before, with the trees that I'm going to be doing, a lot of people will be like, well, why aren't you just wrapping them in foil and then putting plaster of Paris all over them? I'll show you why on this one at the minute. If you can see the it already looks like bark, apart from where there's large chunks missing that I can easily infill. And if I wanted a winter scene, it's very easy now just to leave that tree as it is, apart from paint the main stumps.
I mean, you found something that works for you, and that's what matters, and that's really exceptional. That you found your own thing that works for you, and it's not about copying things from somebody else. So if that's what has made it easier for you and made things work, then that's fantastic. There's no need to copy what one person has done. We all have our own ways of doing things, and if that's what happens to make it easier for you, then go for it.
Yeah.
And is there any other questions you want to? Yeah, go on. Sorry.
There's one question for you. When's the next documentary out? Because there's probably going to be a couple of viewers eventually watching this, going, "Isn't he the guy who made the documentary once?"
Gosh, I have been considering about doing another one. I'm not entirely sure where I'd want it to to go in that regard. I think what I would like to touch on, because there's a lot I didn't get to use from the other Thomas documentary because of the runtime. I mean, the runtime for the Thomas documentary I've just done was about 2 hours or something. I thought that's a long time for someone to sit there. The stuff I didn't get to use in question was actually some of the interviews with my, contributors who mentioned how Thomas had impacted their childhood. And I thought that's something really interesting to hear about each person's individual introduction to Thomas and what he means to them, what certain toys are that they've still got. And I think that's quite important to remember Thomas from our childhood, especially with, I'm not going to mention the new thing that is coming out, but I'm sure you can imagine what it is that I'm referring to. And so it's important to remember those things that we really hold so closely to our hearts and realize actually it doesn't matter if this is from the old era of Thomas that kids might not be able to relate to of today, because this is the impact it had on children back then, and that impact is transferable. So that is my idea, and I still do have some really good answers in interviews from both Thomas's, Jedski and Carter, and the guys from Thomas Tank Merch. So I think that one will be coming out, and that will be something that I think will be very interesting. But also in the pipeline, and I've nearly finished this video, I've done a sort of behind the scenes regarding how this documentary was made. For example, how this was my first documentary I made in quarantine time, how I had very little money at the time, and how I couldn't afford special lights with the green screen effects, how I learned to do the green screen effects, and how I had to direct people via Zoom, especially with the model trains as well. That was very difficult because I'd never done it before. I had to teach myself how to do it. So I have nearly put that out there. I'm doing the last few bits of recording, and it's almost like a spin-off documentary, I suppose. It'll be a short thing of about 15 or so minutes, but it will show people, oh, this is how it was done. Oh, okay, that's what Scott did. Maybe I can use that for my documentaries and whatnot. I mean, I hope it'll help someone, but that will probably be out within the next few weeks at a push, right? At the latest push. So yeah, you can look forward to that in due course.
Okay. Well, I think it's nearly time to wind up. So there's just one more question that I think I'm going to make this a regular occurrence for if I have guests. Mm-hmm. What would be the one model that you would love to be seen made, and which gauge from would you like to see for the channel?
I'm going to say, because he is one of my favorite characters, I'll say Duck. And the scale, I probably like it to be in a G scale, because to hold, a huge duck model, and for me the challenge would be, how can I build a world to film this in? That would be the challenge I'd love. But to see something gauge duck or a 00 gauge duck, this is a huge Great Western pannier where it's obviously done very faithfully to what you'd see in Abby Grant's photos, for instance. I think that would be brilliant.
Well, there is one guy on Twitter, I can never remember his name. He's done Oliver and a duck in gauge 1.
Yes. Gosh, the name escapes me at the moment, but he's used the trains in the garden, and he did a little stunt where he had his duck model push the wagons off the end of the track, which was brilliant when he put the incidental music on it. And it looked stunning. It looked absolutely stunning and very thrilling to watch, actually.
Yeah, I watched that and I was like, someone beat me to my favourite engine. Right, I'm going to have to go to build a gauge 1 diesel now, because luckily my dad works on the railways and he's been able to find a secret stash of paperwork that has designs and plans of engines.
Oh, wow.
And he gave me them, and there's only about 4 engines on there. One of which is a Black 5. Then I've got the 08, the 14XX, and a Salty. So,
oh, wow, okay. The old dockyards, I think the 01 type engines. Gosh. Oh, wow.
So should be able to build them. And Duck was actually going to be one of my first engines in Gauge 1 to build. So you'll have to keep watching
Duck
the space now.
Yeah, Duck might need to be put later to being later on, but I think Diesel might be a good start to make, because luckily Diesel's not, I wouldn't say it's the most complicated thing. He's not as complicated as one like Gordon. Although now that you've mentioned Salty, I'm very keen to see what one of those lovely little dockside shunters would look like, because Salty's model was wonderful. Although it was from the newer era, it did look really, 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 really good. So I'd very much like to see actually Salty's model. I think.
I think Salty was one of the very few. Salty was one of the very few models in the newer era where he was actually weathered. So
and he was done exceptionally well. Oh, hugely, and he was done very well. I mean, our lovely friend who narrated him in the US, Mr. Baldwin, perhaps might not have done the best job, but I did enjoy his edition of it, and so Salty was quite memorable. So I think, I don't know, maybe a Gauge 1 Salty would be fantastic to see.
Yeah, well, of all the years that I've been watching Thomas, I still have not seen any of the American redubs.
I'm going to make a big confession here, and I think I'm going to get absolutely shot for this. I actually, although I love and adore Michael Angelis and Ringo Starr, I really do. You know, I've grown up with them. Michael Angelis is one of the most influential people in my life. I've got quite a few of the old American VHS tapes that I've collected with George Carlin. I'll just get a few of them now, because I do love George Carlin, strangely enough, and I'm a British Thomas fan, so that's not always sat very well with a lot of people. But I do love the George Carlin episode, renditions of it. But there we go.
I always find it funny how in Britain we only had three narrators, serial narrators, and 2 specials, because you had Ringo Starr, Michael Angelis, and more recently, before they changed to fully CGI, we had Mark Morgan, who started off his career in Brookside.
Yes, he was good. He was very good. He
then went on to Holby City and so on and so forth. But then you've got Mr. Perkins, who there's another actor who's died a few years back, I think. For when he was in the engine room and waiting for Thomas to come, and he'd do those little tiddly bits between this episode, that episode, and then Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah,
a lot of people always remember Pierce Brosnan, and they were all excited, thinking, "Yes, we've got a new," and that actually sounds like a decent voice. But then you heard him through that special, and you knew he did the right decision by not doing any more. in the weirdest way possible. It was a nice fit, but not the nicest fitting at the same time.
Yes, his voice was a very sweet voice and a very fatherly voice, the right tone that you'd need to tell Thomas's story, but I think it was just a little too soft, I think.
It's a little bit too soft, and to me it felt like someone had kicked him in the gonads, because when it was Thomas, oh Thomas, can you do it like this, Thomas? I was like,
it was quite raspy at times, to put it in the least amount. But he really did try. He put in a lot of effort, and so I do have respect. And that's the only special I've actually got that I've still kept, actually, out of all the Thomas DVDs. I gave all the others to charity, but that one I thought, you know what, that's quite something to have a special that's still got Pierce Brosnan on it, and it's a very unusual choice. If that was quite a big shock when I told my dad, "Oh, Pierce Brosnan's going to be in it," and at the time I didn't know who he was because I was quite young. He said, "Wait, what? Pierce Brosnan is doing Thomas? Are you sure? The Pierce Brosnan?" He was very surprised.
Well, I admire him because he was filming 2 films while they were trying to film his voice lines for, so they were flying in between this and the other. I admire him for his James Bond, and I admire him for his attempt at Thomas, but I'm glad Thomas wasn't passed the license to kill.
Yeah,
Instead,
absolutely.
they gave that to Mattel.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, Brosnan did try. He was very interested. I've seen the behind the scenes footage, and he put in all of his effort, which is certainly more that can be said for Alec Baldwin. I think in season 6, which was just horrendous, and then Michael Brandon came along, and I mean that makes me want to cry when I listen to Michael Brandon. But that's my own opinion. But yeah, I think it's interesting that all of our British narrators have been from Liverpool.
Yeah, I think, and it shows testament, because when Thomas and the Magic Railroad was getting filmed, the taxi driver driving Britt Elcroft spoke with a soft Liverpool accent, and she went, "Hello, Thomas." So they tried him out, and then he's the luckiest unlucky guy there is, because he's dodged a bullet, which a lot of people think that film was the worst.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
But with this director's cut version that I've still not seen, and apparently we're not getting to see in Britain yet, unless we go through the usual channels of where's the illegal downloads, then I don't quite see how even the director's cut, in all honesty, could actually change it. But I have been told from several sources that it has drastically changed. Certain engines like Gordon, who had a few more lines, now only has one cameo line, and it's like, where the hell did you go?
Yeah, I mean, all that footage is on YouTube, and I think, to be honest, it just takes one person to pass it on, and that stuff is out there forever, technically speaking. And I've seen I've seen all that stuff that you were referring to, the behind the scenes, who hasn't, the director's cut, everything, including what was done for the 20th anniversary. And truth be told, it was very sad how the film was changed. It was very sad, because I personally feel while it would have pushed Thomas's world further into the background, it would have made more sense. And I think they didn't use a lot of very good footage that they filmed in Toronto with Thomas and the models and whatnot. And I think that was quite sad, because it was quite a waste, really, when you think about all the trouble they had with the models and having to rebuild the broken sets. So yeah, but that is unfortunately a very harsh lesson that can be learned from test audiences. They can literally make or break a film, and unfortunately in Brit's case, they nearly broke the film completely. So that is unfortunately what happens in our industry as filmmakers. But Thomas and the Magic Railroad, it's a pretty Marmite thing. Some fans love it, and that's great, but it's really not great as a
For me, I love the models in it, and some of the scenery. I don't like the fact that Diesel 10 turns up and he's got no originated backstory to how he come there. He's just, I'm back to get a lost engine. Well, where have you been in the first 5-6 series before this film? But
yeah,
I like the models, I like the detail in it, but story plot so full of holes. I think a sieve holds more water.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there is a free version of one of the Magic Railroad scripts out there that Brit had written, and I read it, and it was very impressive. Brit knew how to write a fantastic script, and I think it's a shame not all of those really lovable, charming elements that Brit had put on paper were translated, or transferred, I should say, onto the screen. And my heart kind of broke when I sort of realized that, because I knew Brit did try. She really did try, but at the same time, she took on too much. That she's a TV producer, not a film producer. And at the end of the day, the film kind of shows that she's not a film producer because there were so many different problems on set. So
yeah, she probably saw it as an hour and a half long episode instead of it's more than that.
Yeah, you're right. There's a very good analysis by, I'm trying to remember who his name was. I think it's Thomas 1, Edward 2, and Henry 3, who's been on YouTube for a very long time now. And I think it was him who said in his analysis, Thomas and the Magic Railroad, one of its biggest problems was that it wasn't Thomas. It was Thomas in a Narnia-esque like world, but not in the point of the world that we had known before. And the change from a classical little English countryside world of Thomas compared to a Narnia world where it was run on the safety of gold dust and a railroad we never even saw. It was just very strange and very weird, and it's a lot to get used to all of a sudden.
Especially when you look at Peter Fonda's acting and it's, oh, Lily, I'm so glad that you're safe.
I don't quite understand how Britt Allcroft was able to make the actor of Easy Rider look bad. I don't quite understand how that was achieved, but Britt was able to do that, which was a shame because she is a good director. Just I don't think a very good acting director. She's a very good voice director, but not with acting. But you learn those things in filmmaking. Britt unfortunately learned it in the harder way, but that's
a hard, expensive way, because I think I saw reported figures of the film cost 90 or 96 million to make, but only made 73 back.
Yeah, no, that film was a huge loss. It really was quite a loss, and it was pulled from cinemas. Dare I say it? It really was pulled from cinemas. It didn't do well. The merchandise did well because it had Thomas. But I think the biggest problem is that and I remember when I watched it when I was a kid. I was only about 3 at the time when it came out. It's very weird. It's like the TV channel just suddenly changed. You as a child you want to go joyriding with Thomas. As a child, you don't know who Peter and Alec and Mara Wilson and all these people are. You don't know who they are. No. You want to see Thomas, and when you see these real life scenes, that doesn't appeal to you in the way that Thomas does. And Thomas was barely in the film at all. I think like less than 20%. So it didn't do well for I think mainly that reason.
Well, hopefully, maybe the film that we've been hearing rumors for. That's being produced by somebody who's tied up with other big film names. I cannot remember it off the top of my head. He might be able to get the chance to. Yeah, you know the one I mean.
Yeah, what is it? Chris Pratt, I heard, was getting involved with it, and Tom Holland. That's what I have heard and read. I still don't know if it's fully confirmed yet. But yeah, a live action movie of Thomas is due to come out, hopefully.
Yeah. And hopefully it rectifies all the problems. Yeah, Mark Forrester. Thanks, Thomas.
We'll have to go and see what that one will do. I hope it does come out, unlike the World War II one, which I don't think we'll ever get to see now.
Yeah, well, it's probably going to be better than the redubs that I've done with Mr. Lawrence, who's just turned up in the chats. Well, it's joined in the last couple of minutes anyway. So, what was your favourite series, and what was your favourite episode from that series as the final note for the video tonight before I close out?
That is a tough question. Oh, mine's a bit of a strange one. I actually, and I'm quite biased in this, my favorite series will probably have to be series 4. Not because of the narrow gauge engines, actually, but because of the episodes with Thomas and Stepney, or well, basically all the episodes with Stepney in it, really, because I had my first VHS tape was Thomas and Stepney. And just the way how all the detail was done when Rusty rescued Stepney from the scrapyard, and the atmospheric feel of Knapford Station at night when Stepney came thundering through. Those episodes are all done with such intricate detail. You were so sucked in. And I just loved it, watching the characters interact and Thomas's ego taking quite a battering. But my favorite episode is easily, without a doubt, Buzz Buzz, because of all the different techniques that they did to make that scene of the bees and James's nose and things like that, which I think was very, very unique for the time. And I really respect how far they went just to make something which was a bit of a gag, although it was terrifying for many kids at the time, including me, really come to life. They did it brilliantly. And I really do think that's one of the most memorable and iconic Thomas episodes. And it is quite funny as well. So it's I've always got quite fond memories of that.
Yeah. So, right. Well, on that note, I'm going to call an end to the stream. So, thanks for joining us tonight, then, Scott.
You're most welcome.
For everyone else who's watching this later on instead of on the live, keep tuned. I've said what's going to be happening. There's going to be lots more. There's going to be trees, scatters, engine builds, layout builds, anything and everything that you can think of. If you've got suggestions, leave them in the comments or find me on Twitter at the same name as the channel. And let's speak to you all again soon. So, bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks, Scott.